Welcome to the ModPo Webcast from rainy Philadelphia. Welcome to Chapter 7, Week 6 on the beats, Breaking with Conformity. You may notice that I don't look like Al Filreis. He is not with us in Philadelphia this evening. He is in Prague, and we're flying solo without him somehow, some way. We are also flying without Lily Applebaum on the phones. She's off doing fun things. So this is a new experiment for us. So I'm Julia Block. I'm thrilled to be hosting the webcast this evening. Al, as I say, is in Prague this week, and he tells us that he has recorded a video of a group of ModPo people who came from Israel, Scotland, and Switzerland, as well as from Prague, doing a close reading of I Know a Man. And if you go to the webcast discussion forum, you can actually see a photo that Al has posted of Diana Aubert with her modernist scarf. Diana traveled from Basel, Switzerland to join the meetup in Prague. So hello to Al. I think it's 3 a.m. where he is now, so he's probably sleeping, I hope. But I know he'll be watching this later. It's true, he actually doesn't sleep. So tonight we're going to chat for about an hour. Those of you watching us remotely, you are invited to call us with your questions or follow the discussion on Twitter or the discussion forums. You can call us at 215-573-9752. We actually already have a caller on the line, so I'm going to get through these introductions really quickly so we can get to that caller. One of our callers tonight is going to receive a copy of Anne Waldman's book, Kill or Cure, which is her 1994 book from Penguin Books, described as a bold prescriptive for these apocalyptic days. And it sort of felt fitting for tonight when it's so dark and stormy here in Philadelphia. So again, you can tweet at us using the hashtag ModPoLive. You can call us. You can post to the discussion forums. I'm going to introduce my panelists. Dave Poplar.
Good evening.
Teaching assistant for ModPo for these many years. Mandana, community TA for 2 years. 1 year. It feels like you've been with us the entire time. It's a very good thing, joining us all the way from New York. And joining us remotely via Hangouts, hello, Ali Castleman and Amaris. Hello. I'm not sure. I know
I forgot to turn on my mic. Hi.
Great. So hello to Amaris.
Hello.
Hello, Anna. And hello, Erica Kaufman.
Hello.
So we have a lot that we can and want to discuss tonight. But I'm going to go ahead and take our caller because this caller has already been on hold for a few moments. So Connie, would you let us know who's on the phone?
Now, so would you turn off your webcast, please?
Hi, Julia.
Hi, Connie.
Steve Klein calling from Omaha, Nebraska.
Awesome. Hey, Steve. One moment, Steve.
Yep.
Hey,
Okay,
Steve.
hello.
Are you there, Steve?
Hello.
Steve, we're trying to patch you in. Steve. Does he seem to be still there?
Steve? Okay. Okay, I'm gonna patch
Okay,
him
we're
in.
trying to patch him through again. Hi, Steve.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. So you're calling from Omaha, Nebraska?
I am.
How are you this evening?
I'm great.
What's the weather
Having
like?
a good time. This week in ModPo is it's just made everything in my life.
It's made everything in your life. That's fantastic. It's not often that a week of poetry does that, or maybe it is often actually. Maybe it's frequent. So what today? What in this moment do you like best about this week's materials?
Well, I grew up in the era of the beats and was reading them when I was very young, and I've enjoyed them for 50 years. In fact, that I started to, as I was reading the discussion threads tonight, I started to kind of question that kind of leads directly into my question.
Okay, great.
Are you ready for my question?
Yeah, we are ready for your question. What is your question?
Okay, now, I I know that that you can't give professional advice, but
Well, I can try,
the beats,
but
even when they're dark and bleak and grim, make me happy.
ah.
Do you think that there might be something wrong with me?
That's such a great question. So even when the beat poetry is bleak and grim and unhappy, there's something about it that makes you happy. Does that mean there's something wrong with you? I'm going to turn to Dave and ask him his thoughts. So this is
yes. Next caller.
No, come on.
No, I find it exhilarating. I mean, I find some of the saddest, most depressing parts of How to be rejuvenating almost. There's this one section in the first part that we read that talks about it begins, who plunged themselves under meat trucks looking for an egg, who threw their watches off the roof to cast their ballot for eternity outside of time, and alarm clocks fell on their heads every day for the next decade, who cut their wrists 3 times unsuccessfully, gave up and were forced to open antique stores where they thought they were growing old and cried, who were burned alive in their innocent flannel suits on Madison Avenue amid blasts of leaden verse and the tanked-up clatter of the iron regiments of fashion and the nitroglycerin shrieks of the fairies of advertising, the mustard gas of sinister, intelligent editors, or who were run down by the drunken taxicabs of absolute reality. I find that just bleak. It's just like an idealistic backfire. But the way it's put together, I find inspiring.
So the way it's put together seems really key, right? It's not what it's saying, but how it's saying it. Is that a fair paraphrase of what you mean when you say it's how it's put together?
Yeah, absolutely. And then in the context of this, it sort of builds momentum for what's ultimately going to be putting themselves on the outside of society and being able to say, I don't want to be a part of that. Not necessarily I want to change that, but I just want to do my own thing. So that's the first step to that. But it's such a bleak, heartfelt expression of just idealism gone wrong, I think.
So Steve, are you still with us? Steve, are you still with us? Steve, are you still with us?
Hello, Steve.
Okay, I think Steve either might not be with us anymore, or we're still working to patch him in.
But I didn't catch what Julia was asking.
Oh, there he is. Hi, Steve. Sorry, we couldn't hear you there for a second.
Okay. And I couldn't hear you either. The sound is on the phone is fading in and out. So I didn't. I heard a bit of what Dave was saying.
Okay, yeah, he was saying that to him that the lines in Howl especially are indeed very bleak, but there's something about the way they're put together. There's something, he used the word momentum, and he was suggesting that that's the thing that kind of lifts us and shows us that something else is possible. So I'm going to turn to Dan Bergman in just a second, but does that resonate with your experience, Steve? The idea that there's a momentum to this poetry, there's this idea that you can kind of get somewhere with it.
Regardless of the specificity of the bleak image or the cut wrists or the burned madmen. This stuff is it's an absolute joy to listen to.
It's an absolute joy to listen to. Yeah, that seems really key, right? Because so much of the stuff we're reading this week, we're listening to. 2 pieces in particular we're not actually reading on the page in ModPo, even though they are pieces that exist on the page, but we're primarily listening to them. So Dan Bergman, I think, has something to add about it. And hopefully you can hear this, Steve, so hang with us for just a second.
Dan spelled out first, and this is in line with what Dave and Julia were saying. Dan, sit up, please. First, they have put their bleakness into beauty. Second, there is humor. And third, it leaves us less alone with our own bleakness.
Nice. So, Steve, I don't know if you heard that, but Dan just suggested there's something, the humor in this work is really important, and the idea that we're somehow less alone. Does that resonate with you too?
Yes, and I heard Dan. I heard Dan very well, and I'm guessing that no one there thinks that there's something wrong with me.
No, I think actually you're in good company here.
So there may be something wrong with all of us. Yeah.
Or there's something wrong with all of us, but we're in it together. And you're, what, like 1,500 miles away from Philadelphia, something
Yeah.
like that?
Yeah, but ModPo is just spectacular. I love ModPo. I love all of you people. I know that I'm out here on the cosmic plains, and you're out there in the east, but it's just wonderful to be a part of this community.
Well, we love to have you, and Nebraska is certainly a beautiful country, so we're glad to have you in our company in that part of the world. So thank you so much for calling in. So, Jason, you had a hand.
Well, what I was going to do is to take the crazy thing and just run with it a little bit and ask Dave to do something really crazy.
Dave, is that consensual?
Nope.
It's not. It's not consensual, but I think Dave will do it. Will do it when I ask.
Okay.
And I think it's important to think about the say Billie Holiday, or the music that's coming out around this time, which may express. If we think of the song "Strange Fruit," it's a devastating song that's incredibly not uplifting, but powerful and beautiful to hear. So what I was going to ask Dave to do is to read those same lines, but to read them without making the whole words. To do it like a scat.
Oh, I can't scat.
You could do it. Just read it, but to
Would you like
make
to try? I have
to make
it right
or just to make the sounds of the consonants, because if you listen to it, the sounds are bouncing all over the place, and it's really clearly written for the voice and for the ear.
So you're suggesting we read those lines in a way that highlights how they sound more than their semantic meaning, more than the meanings
I think
of the
that's
words?
such a great point, though, because listening to him read it, you can tell that he rehearsed it, he practiced it, because there are some parts that are so difficult to read easily, like who cut their wrists 3 times successively, unsuccessfully.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. It takes me a while to read that smoothly. And
Well, if you pick a line and that just make the consonant sounds.
I'm not going to be able to do
Jason,
this.
would you do it?
Yeah, I'll
Why don't you come up here and do it?
All right.
But do it quickly, because we already have another
I don't play charades
caller.
either. I don't do that.
But David's being
silly.
Okay.
Just
Which
move,
did you
move away
read?
from Dave's mic.
This is some of it.
Okay. Who were put Allah in a fla suits the lava taka rajafa nagalagala shirik. I mean, the consonants are moving up and down the throat, like they're coming. We are moving like from making sounds here, and it's zipping all around. So I just ask people to.
Would you even suggest that people try this at home?
Try this. This is safe to try at home.
Is it safe to try?
Yeah, you won't be you may be injured. You may go mad, but I would suggest barrel down the highways of Pastor to Utah, Golgotha, Jail, Solitude, Watcher, Birmingham, Jazz. Try to, or say a line so many times that you forget what the words mean.
Say the line so many times that you forget what the words mean. And
How about that?
I have that gives me an idea of a question I want to ask Erica, because I know she thinks a lot about bringing sound and readings into our experience of poetry. So, Erica, can you say something about why it's always a good idea to do something out loud with the poems?
I think that the way that we interact with the poem changes when we read it out loud. I mean, I think we just heard from Jason how different that rendering of Hal was, and how much it asked us to shift the way that we were thinking about reading the poem on the page. And I think that this week's poems in particular are kind of made to be read out loud.
This week's poems in particular are meant to be read out loud. Yeah, they're meant to be sounded, right? That season, especially in the title of that one Mary Baraka piece that we have, How You Sound, when he's talking about it's not just what you say, but how you sound.
Yeah, I remember teaching Hal with a group of students years ago, and we read the whole thing out loud together, and a student came up to me after class and was like, I didn't know that that was poetry.
I didn't know that was poetry?
Yeah.
That's what your student said? So what was it? What was that? What's the that in that sentence, do you think?
I think that was the ability to hear it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
And the rhythm of the poem and the way that it's not a rhymed kind of formal poem in the sense that people are used to based on the kinds of things that you read normally in like junior high and high school classrooms. Like it's this kind of all-encompassing long line that's extremely poetic but kind of defies what one might be learning in school about what a poem is.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, there's something about a lot of the material we read in ModPo that makes you go, wait, I didn't know you were allowed to do that with poetry. And that starts, it goes all the way back to Whitman and Dickinson, even especially at the beginning of this course, but I think it comes back again and again in each week. And this week's version of that is a little bit like, I didn't know you were allowed to make sounds like that and call it poetry. I didn't know you were allowed to be Anne Waldman and stand up and shout at the audience, essentially, and screech and call that poetry. So Connie, we have another caller on the line. Who is it, and where are they calling from?
We have Daniel on the line, and he's calling from Philadelphia, and he wants to continue the conversation on humor.
Awesome.
Hello, Daniel. Hello. Hi, I'm going to patch you in now.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm really quite good, but I seem to be out of sync with the broadcast. I'm having a man talking about Billie Holiday now. Am I out of sync or am I in sync?
Yeah, just turn down the volume on the broadcast because there's like a delay.
Yeah, sure.
So you have a question for us about humor?
Well, I think that, and by the way, I'm a big fan of what's going on here. It's really wonderful. I think that humor, we must push it a little more to the point of comedic. Alan, I knew Alan quite well, actually, and a lot of the Ferlinghetti published a couple of my books. I knew him quite well, and Philip Whalen and Michael McClure and so on. So there was an extraordinary blast of comedic kind of inspiration, coming from T.S. Eliot, that grim, that solemnity.
The gravitas.
And, the kind of beautiful but slightly flatness of William Carlos Williams. And Alan, in particular, with Howl, is really high comedy tragedy. It's kind of like the two masks scrunched together. I was at I don't know how much, personal biography you want here, but I was at a gathering in which he and Voznesensky were talking about how Bob Dylan seemed to be like a kind of a troubadour jester from a Russian shtetl, right? And when I was saying that, I was thinking that's Alan's work. He also would read it with a comedic edge, and a lot of the work. Gregory Corso is another one, very kind of high comedy, and fueled often by drugs, which is another thing we've avoided talking about, I think. But that was certainly the experimentation with drugs and the sudden opening into expressiveness, almost, going along with the expressionist painters at the time, or not the expressionists, but the abstract expressionists. You have a whole kind of realm of almost epic comedy. And when you get to the New York School, which we're going to do next, I guess, you have Kenneth Koch and all those folks. Didn't mean to rhyme that. And you have the same kind of thing, and certainly with a lot of those poets. Even Ashbery is still kind of droll.
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of wit, certainly, in the New York School. But Daniel, what you're saying about humor and the phrase you just used, epic comedy, I'm wondering if we can put that in conversation with Steve's question. Steve was the caller before you.
Sure.
And he was wondering about what does it say about me that I'm comforted by this stuff or I'm inspired.
Well, that's the interesting thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I had a theater company in Berkeley in the 60s,
Mm-hmm.
and it was based on meditation, and it was very ecstatic and all of that. And Alan once said to me, you know, I can't be like that because I have to take care of all my drug friends and all my people in jail and in the madhouse. He was like a big kind of mother figure in some funny way, and he was always taking care of all his friends.
Mm.
So there was the sense that, you know, certainly in Howell, you have this catalog of disasters, of these people that were in a disaster situation, but they're done with Alan's voice. They're somehow elevated to a kind of heroic, level. And even though his delivery of Howell was often almost, what would you say, self-ironic or self-deprecatingly.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So even if it's a bardic voice, it's an exceptional voice. You know, I am reading Howl to you, and I am up on the stage. But
right.
You're suggesting there's a way in which he's summoning the community in that voice. He's not solitary. He's not.
That's true. That's
out there
very true. And the one thing that for people that ever saw him read, I always thought in the Dodge Poetry Festival when there were 1,000 people or something, a few thousand people maybe. I always felt that his poetry gave permission to people to be who they are. That was a big thing, I thought. Mm-hmm. His complete unzipped, expressiveness of the as he would say, the trembling human soul, kind of opened the hearts of people.
I love putting it that way. It goes back to Steve wondering if it's okay to be who he is experiencing these poems.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that was true of generally the beat permission. I mean, the beat trend, even with Kerouac and so on. With Creeley, you have a kind of self-deprecating irony. With Whalen, it's hilarious, but so deadpan. Gary Snyder was not very funny, but he was rich and is rich still. And McClure was also more painterly than funny. But Philip Lamantia, who hasn't been mentioned, but you haven't been mentioning everybody I know, was also surrealistically, almost acidically funny.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Daniel, can I invite you to create a discussion thread in ModPo about this notion of humor? Because it sounds like you're bringing a lot of poets together sort of under this umbrella term, and I think it can be really useful to folks.
What would you like me to do?
Oh, talk about this in the discussion forums.
All right. Was that all on air or not?
Yes, you are on air.
I'm sorry. I can't really tell.
Yeah, you're with us. Even though I asked you to turn down your volume, but I assure you, you are with us.
I can hear you better now. Yeah, I couldn't hear you too well.
Okay, good. Well, listen, I'm so thrilled that you called in. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us.
Well, thank you.
And I'm going to
keep it all going. It's really great.
We will, and come back and see us soon, especially since you're right here in Philadelphia.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, good.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks, Daniel. So, Dave Poplar, have you been checking out the discussion forums at all?
I have. I wanted to comment a little bit more about humor, though, because I think that's such an interesting, important point, because humor is really, throughout history, the way we've gotten at truths and hard truths, and I mean, humor has been used in so many ways to say things that we couldn't ordinarily say, to make tragedy more acceptable, to speak truth to power, and also in another sense, it's a social bonding thing too. You can, create everybody on an in-group and out-group, and it's interesting how well that can be used in poetry to do those same things.
Would that be like the fool in Shakespeare, who's allowed to say things to the king that no one else could?
Exactly.
Because he says it in a different kind of manner.
That's exactly it. Yes.
Yeah, speaking truth to power is a nice frame to have with us here. I think I want to turn to the TAs we haven't heard from yet and ask them to say something about humor. And for some reason, Anna Strong, I keep I feel like I've seen you laugh a lot in the discussion videos for ModPo. You often find humor in the stuff that we're reading. Would it be accurate to say that you? Would it be accurate to say that? Are you a person who finds humor and thinks about the power of humor in poetic form?
Yes, I guess. But I think also especially because like last week doing the conservative poets of the 50s and the communist poets in the 30s, much as I find that stuff interesting and I think it raises really important questions, I wouldn't necessarily call it fun.
So humor isn't necessarily fun.
No. The humor is not there last week. The humor is definitely there this week. So it's kind of a sea change, but it's such a relief.
Yeah. Nice.
So yes, let's laugh.
I like that the person who's known for encouraging us to do the work is also the one who's looking for the fun.
That's right. Exactly. And it sounds like we have another call coming in already. Connie, who's on the phone?
Hi, we have a caller from Chile, and her name is Rodney.
Oh, wow. Welcome. Ronnie, is it?
Yeah, it's Rodney.
Rodney?
Yeah.
And you're calling from Chile?
I'm calling from Chile, yeah.
How are you?
Oh, fine. I'm really happy to have this opportunity to thank you because I've had such a wonderful time working with ModPo. It's sort of fantastic.
That's great. What's been your favorite poem so far, if you have one?
It's so difficult to say. They're all tremendously different, and each one comes as a kind of revelation. So ask me at the end of the course.
I will. I will. I promise. And what are you thinking about right now? Do you have a question for us, or you have a comment?
Yeah, I have a question that I keep sort of wanting to ask more and more.
Okay.
And the question has to do with like how you read some of these poems.
Okay.
Like maybe not particularly, it's not particularly about the beats at this moment, but well, yeah. For example, I Know I'm a Man. It has those line breaks, and when you read it out loud following them, it sounds very strange. It does add to the poem. But this particular poem, it seems to add to more. In other poems, it's kind of even weird to read like that, I think.
Yes.
Or, for example, Young Woman at the Window.
Yes.
Carlos William, he reads it as though it was just one big enchantment, you know. But the way you're supposed to read it, I think, is, you know, with pauses at the end of each line break.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
And it's very strange, I find. Does anyone else think it is?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought this question to us. So I'll make a confession. I was a little nervous about this webcast tonight, you know, running it without Al. And so one of the things I do when I'm nervous is I over-prepare. So I have a lot of questions that we're already almost more than halfway through the webcast. We're not going to get to them all. But one of them was about line breaks, and I Know a Man. And here you are. You're bringing that question to us, and I didn't even have to initiate it.
It must be because I'm nervous too.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you for helping me out. So this question is so important. It's a question about how we read, and when you say how we read, you mean how we read out loud, how we read to ourselves. Is it both?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we read out loud, when we read to ourselves, we can sort of cope with all those line breaks and put them in or take them out. It doesn't seem to matter.
Yes.
When you read out loud.
Yes, and it's very true that when we listen to Creeley reading that poem, and you can listen to a number of different variations of him reading that poem over the years on Pen Sound, there are differences in the readings, but he does tend to really stop at the ends of the lines, and you can really hear him taking that breath and thinking about that unit of the line as the place to pause. But other poets of ours read straight through; they just run.
Yeah, but Sid Corman tends to really respect those line breaks too.
Yes.
For example, or Niedecker.
Niedeker, and Williams, sometimes he respects the line breaks and sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes you hear a line break that you don't actually see on the page, which is very mysterious. If you're
and
looking...
Ginsberg has to take a breath at the end of his line.
Yeah, exactly. So this is such a great question. I want to kind of do a poll of our TAs and our panelists and ask everyone to say a few words about the way you read. Let's just do a kind of first-person narrative of how we approach these line breaks on the page. So let's start with Allie. Allie, how do you deal with line breaks when you're reading a poem?
I think it has a lot more to do with, it's hard to just kind of like think of line breaks as a kind of area in itself with that, because I find that it's so intrinsic, it's so closely tied up with a rhythm, and so very often I can't really get a sense of like how I want to read it until I read it. Sometimes I find myself like not being comfortable with the way that I'm reading a poem until the second or third time that I'm reading it, because I don't know how it's going to go, like both, and that goes for the content of the poem, like trying to piece together what it's trying to say, but it also goes with sound, I think, especially in a lot of the poetry that we read in this course. It's difficult orally too. So, yeah, I don't know if that's a helpful answer, but
no, it's good. What you're doing is reminding us that there are two functions of line breaks. One is meaning in terms of like what the words mean, and the other is the sound. It's a sonic cue to where the poem is headed. So next, I want to turn to Amaris. Your thoughts on reading a poem and thinking about the line breaks, thinking about where things get segmented and shaped.
Yeah, she was bringing up in I Know a Man how she reads it out loud differently because of the line breaks. But for me, in that poem in particular, I took it as liberty to interpret it different from a grammatical standpoint. So, for example, I guess because I am, and then the line breaks, and then always talking, you can think of it as an assertion of identity, which then switches to the gerund am talking in the next line. Or at the end, the last two lines, the Christ's sakes, look, can be just an imperative to look, which turns to the last line, which is look out, where you're going. So for me, I found that poem really interesting to interpret from different perspectives, because it does seem sort of such a man facing his mortality or facing some unknown or some element of fear, and how he heads towards it and confronts it face to face. So, or the surrounds in that poem as well, the line breaking there really gives this impression of surrounds
gets chopped in half across the line break. Yeah. Nice. Anna, your thoughts on reading and line breaks and segmentation?
I think I usually kind of take a cue from how the poem actually looks on the page, because if you've got thinking like a poem like Song of Myself or Howl, because they are almost like so prosy, the really long lines, I tend to kind of just blow through on the line breaks in those ones. And then when you have like a really short poem like Niedeker, or like with a poet like Niedeker, or some of Williams's shorter poems, when I feel like there has actually been more attention on the poet's part to the line break, that's when maybe I'll pay a little bit more attention as a reader.
So you're looking at other, you're taking kind of other cues from the poem. If it looks very prose-like, or if it looks more elliptical and fragmented, you might literally read the line breaks differently.
Yes.
Emily Harnett, good evening. I'm wondering what your
Good
thoughts
morning, Julia.
on reading.
I just said good morning, didn't I?
Reading.
I also take a
Emily, I don't think we can hear you, unfortunately. It looks like you're saying really important things.
Yeah, Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think maybe something was touching your mic.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Can you? Sorry, so I'm gonna.
Can you recap for us briefly?
Sure. Yeah, just sort of the lineation, I think, becomes another type of syntax, which changes the way we interact with the semantic meaning of the words and the grammatical meaning of the words. Yeah.
As important as this syntax, the relationship between words themselves and the lines. Sorry about that, Rodney. It looks like we lost you, so I hope you're still listening. Erica, maybe she's back. Erica, really quick thoughts on reading and line breaks.
Line breaks are super, super important to me. I always pay a lot of attention to them, and I don't know that. I think it's because I also write poetry, and for me as a poet, I spend, I think, most of my composing and editing time thinking about my line breaks. So when I'm reading something like the Crilly poem or even like the Ginsberg poem, I feel like you learn a huge amount just by watching where the punctuation is and where the actual breaks occur.
Nice. So, Rodney, are you still with us? Are you back with us?
But I wasn't able to hear like the T.
Oh,
unfortunately. But I'll just say thank you very much to all of them because it's been wonderful listening to them.
Good.
At other times, and I'll see them later on the deferred webcast.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for calling us.
Thank you.
All right. Good night. So, Dan Bergman, you have something to say.
Dan says, or more importantly, spelled out, I have to have everything read aloud. I have to have everything read aloud. I like to have it read 3 times. Once with the line breaks, then as in prose, and then a 3rd time as with modest line breaks. Also rhythm like pentameter, the same thing. So reading it very clearly with the line breaks and rhythms, and then as if it were prose, and then again with just a gentle inflection from those things.
And reading
we have learned to read to Dan that way.
And reading it more than once seems really key also. Eric Allen Weinstein has something to say.
Yeah, I think breath was very important to the Beats, and they were always listening for their own breath and capturing both the breath that they express verbally and the breath of thought. So that it was very important to them to capture the form of their thoughts as they were happening and then render them into speech as they thought them. Will this make it any easier to think about line breaks? No, it will not. Sorry about that. But I do think if you want to talk about paying attention to form, you can often recapture the way Ginsberg would have read a poem or Kerouac would have read something by listening to the breath.
Nice. So something Eric just said about paying attention to form and its significance, its meaning. Mandana, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the matter of the line break as content. So in ModPo, we say a lot about sort of a line we use a lot is it's not what you say, it's the how of what you say it. Is this relevant to our discussion?
Yes, I think so. But for me, I have to be honest. A lot of times I look at the line breaks not as hard and fast punctuation. It's just where it happened to break, and you have to, as Daniel said, reread it again and again to see perhaps where the natural line break is for you. Also, when you come to a poem, you're coming as an individual that day where you are emotionally or personally. And I'll read poems I've read before very differently on a day for some reason, because it's raining or something like that. So I think we are always changing, so how we're reading the poems is always changing.
And that includes how we read their form. Right?
Exactly.
Whether we race through those line breaks or take a minute to
You know,
pause.
here's the thing, we're in modern and contemporary poetry. I think if you're looking at something a little more classical, the different ways that people speak is very defined. And I think with this, going back to the comment of being playful, you can be a little more playful with this. I remember when we were doing, let's say, We Real Cool from Gwendolyn Brooks, the way she says it is differently than the way I would say it. But it still has value however way you say it.
Absolutely. Nice. So we already have another call. Our phone is blowing up tonight, but first I want to ask Dave if you've seen anything interesting on Twitter or the discussion forums.
I forget who tweeted "Go Mandana." That was.
I think that was
okay.
T. I think it might have been everyone. I think everyone said "Go Mandana." It's right. T, who also doesn't appear to need sleep.
There were a couple questions in the forums too, but if you want to go to the caller first,
Okay.
in case they get.
Connie, who do we have on the phone?
We have Philip from Missouri, and he wants to talk about Ginsberg singing Blake's Garden of Love.
Hi, Philip.
Hi, Julia.
How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Got moved and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are things down in Missouri?
They're fine. It's beautiful here. I love it.
Awesome.
Yep.
And
I'm glad to be talking to y'all too, because messed up with Coursera. I can't get emails from many of my courses for some reason, and they can't seem to figure out why. So
Yeah.
I can't stay in touch as much as I'd like to.
Yeah, the site honestly has been crapping out a lot on us the last few days.
Really?
Yeah.
It's not just me.
I don't think
Okay,
it's just
I
you.
thought so.
Yeah, and poor Anna couldn't even hold her office hours because she couldn't get into the site at one point.
Oh, well, then there is a problem.
Yeah,
Well,
so it's definitely not just you. So please hang in there. Apparently Mercury's in retrograde. That may have something to do with it.
Okay. I love that. I'll just blame Mercury then.
Yeah, as always.
Okay. Well, anyway, I wanted to talk about Ginsberg singing bluegrass to Blake's Garden of Love, and I wanted to talk to Mandana about it because she and I have swapped a lot of song suggestions in the different forums and discussion groups. To me, I think he chooses bluegrass in order to both celebrate and mock religion and the subject of the poem, which I think is exactly what Blake was trying to do too. So I think he's got the spirit of the thing down pat. What do you think?
Mandana, what do you think?
Do you think it's mocking or it's questioning? There's a slight difference in that. Is he mocking it or is he questioning it?
Well, he's definitely questioning it, but his choice of bluegrass to sing that tune and all the associations that bluegrass has in this culture, American culture, with gospel and down-home religion, makes me feel like there's a mocking tone to it too in making that choice.
Now, I know I keep asking questions with your questions, but you said that you felt the same way about Blake.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Blake mocks organized religion and believes in the spirituality of the individual soul.
Well, I think that's a great point in general. If you look at certainly a lot of what Ginsberg and the Beat generation and certainly even the New York schools, I think that they, not so much mocking, but I saw all the references in Howl as to angels, and I'd mentioned to Julia earlier that I think they want us to maybe think a little bit differently about spirituality. You know, in Howl, you see a lot of things that are seemingly of the devil, but really, for me, when I read it, I think that he is reminding us that the devil is actually a fallen angel. And so in all the muck and the muddiness, these are all really angels. We should embrace them, much like we should embrace his generation. They may not look like they're lovable, but they are as lovable, and they are angels as well.
Sure. And that fits right in with the gentleman who called and asked about whether he was there was something wrong with him.
Yeah.
You know, I had a discussion on a mental health forum recently with a woman who told me that she saw angels and things, and she believed in them, and asked me what I thought about that, and I said, well, I don't know whether William Blake actually saw angels or not, but the vividness of his descriptions and his illustrations lead me to believe that he saw something. So that's just fine. I have no problem with you feeling that way about it.
You know, just one other comment, Philip. What you just said, that word feel, whether or not you see them, they're feeling them.
Yes.
And perhaps that's more important than saying, you know, seeing has a lot of meanings. And I think we put a lot, at least in our society, about seeing is believing. But if they're feeling them, what's wrong with that?
There is nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Well, Philip, in honor of both Seeing is Believing and Speaking Truth to Power, I'd like to offer you this copy of Kill or Cure by Anne Waldman.
I'm so glad, Julia.
For being one of our callers. So I'm going to ask Connie to take down your mailing address in a second. But I also want to just say thank you so much again for calling in and saying hi. And
yeah, I'm glad I did. You know, last time I called in, he was going to give the call to the first caller, but I called too soon before he could tell everybody that was what he was going to do, so he gave it to the second caller.
I remember
so
that.
I
Yeah,
myself.
So I wanted to make sure you got your book tonight.
Great. Thank you, Julia.
Okay. Well, hey, enjoy the rest of the Beats week, and we'll see you next week for the New York School.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Have a good night. And Connie, I'll take down your address. So, Dave, I feel like we've been neglecting the forums here for a second, so let's try to find something to...
They've been relatively quiet. There was a good question
They've all been calling, that's why. Calling.
Wrong medium. Katrin Horowitz asked about I Know a Man, if you want to stay on that poem.
Sure.
She said, I'm curious what other people think about Creeley's title. Does it refer to John, who is not John, or the narrator himself, or possibly just a colloquial phrase, as in, I know a guy who can sell me a big goddamn car. And what does he know about the man? The more I think about it, the more enigmatic the title and its relation to the poem becomes.
Yeah, so this is like the crucial, well, one of the crucial questions about this poem. And I want to ask Jason, would you be willing to think out loud about who the man could be? What are some of the possible meanings of who this man is? What are some of the possible readings of the man in I Know a Man?
Find the man. Okay.
I mean, is it John? As I said to my friend, John.
Oh, no. Well, who knows? But it could be Robert Creeley.
Okay.
It could be... we don't know if I is Robert Creeley.
Okay, so it could be...
Who's the I?
The man could be the I of the poem. It could be
it could be like
Robert
a man
Creeley.
that knows himself.
It could be a man who knows himself and is talking to himself somehow.
It could be... who knows if the I's are consistent, if the I in the title is the I in the...
Wait, what?
Oh.
The I can't be consistent. The I might not be consistent in the poem?
No, they may be cross-eyed.
Are you suggesting there might be multiple subjectivities in this poem?
I would like to say that the title provides the capacity to separate itself from the rest of the poem, and that the pronoun in a title doesn't necessarily correspond to a pronoun in the first line of a poem.
Wow, that seems really radical.
Yes, I think, right.
I'd like to think of myself as really radical, so thank you, Juliet.
You're welcome, Jason.
I think that I Know a Man could be then the man, so as I said, it could be that I is the man who's beginning to speak in that subsequent I.
And also, what about I know? I know is a very powerful phrase.
Yeah.
What is Mandana, what is it? What are you usually saying when you say I know? Like what
You don't know.
tone?
No, but you're emphatic. But if I can just say, though, if you look at that third line, you have John, comma, I. Could he be John?
That's what Jason just suggested.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Dave, I know a man. It's a man, not one of the other possibilities,
That's
right?
what I was just thinking. It could stand in for human. It could stand in for man, as in mankind. So he's referring to the loss of subjectivity or the fractioning of subjectivity of the entire society, if you read it that way.
So lots and lots of subjects. Jason.
Let me say one little thing.
Yes.
This is out of left field, but the command to know, or the question of knowledge as good or bad, is something that is within the Bible. It's a biblical reference, and this is well when Linnaeus first offered his classification of every species, each one had methodical physical description, habits, and such. And then the last entry in this enormous tome is Homo sapiens, and after which we get know thyself.
So what does it mean to know man? No, not the man, not this man, not it, like who is getting known? It's everyone, right?
Or is a man is knowing a man knowing all men?
As long as if you know a man,
Or is every man so distinct that to know a man is
to know someone in all their particularity, all of their idiosyncrasy.
In the biblical sense.
is to know humanity. Eric, you have something to add here.
So I read this poem in the vein of, say, Thomas Pynchon's Inherent Vice, as a critique of a certain moment or a certain aspect of beat culture. And the I Know a Man is the beginning of a tall tale being told maybe by Neil Cassidy while he's driving a car down the motorway at 130 miles an hour, and he's not really looking, and the other person is like, there's chickens in the road, but it's also about the kind of sharing of philosophy and tall tales, and the way the Beats use their history as tall tales. So it becomes a meta poem about a certain moment in literary history and a certain way of living, maybe that's very attractive, but also maybe dangerous.
So the title already announces that this will be a poem about what it's like to drive both against and into the darkness that surrounds us, right? Which is kind of the cultural moment of the Beats and the poets we consider it as adjacent to the Beats, like Robert Creeley. Such a great question about the title. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier about how to read, right? How do you read a title? How do you read a title in relationship to a poem? Often in the case of especially someone like William Carlos Williams, we read the title as the first line in the poem. And in the case of I Know a Man, it functions very well that way, I think. So we have another caller. Connie, who do we have on the phone?
We have John from Seattle on the phone, and he actually wants to continue talking about Creeley's I Know a Man.
Awesome. This is like my favorite poem, so I apologize to anyone who is getting upset that we're not necessarily going to have time for more, but I must have manifested this. So, okay, John from Seattle.
Yeah, hi. How is everybody?
Hi, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great, thank you. I wanted to just talk a little bit about Robert Creeley. I heard him speaking regarding the way that he recites this poem, I Know a Man. And one of the discussions during the week was that he sounded, existentially challenged, or some kind of distress in the way that he was speaking. And while that certainly could be the case, what Creeley said was that the reason he was speaking that way was that it was a musical thing. It was a backbeat. And I thought that this week was so amazing because of the musicality component, the jazz, the drumming, and
the Jane Cortez and the Ann Waldman recordings.
It's so amazing. And so I thought it was important to just recognize that what he was doing there was a very conscious effort, again, to sound, in this case, you know, what rock and roll or maybe rhythm and blues, even more predating rock and roll per se, but Chuck Berry, if it has a beat, you can't forget it. And I think that was part of what he was doing there.
Mm-hmm.
And one other just quick thought, and this is more maybe a little bit on the humorous side, but I was just loving Ginsberg, and it struck me that he was the unholy love child of Stein, Kerouac, and Whitman, and just the way he's such a sprite and such an imp, and all of his subversiveness just is quite delicious and humorous and serious. But you know, it's the whole gestalt, it's the whole idea. I think that maybe his whole Buddhist thing, but yeah, that was just kind of my thoughts on this week. Loving the program, the whole thing, though, and I love the TAs and.
Yeah, aren't they great?
Yeah, it's like I don't know how you choose these folks, but it's brilliant. So, love it.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for that. I'm wondering, when you say you're pointing out that Creeley thought of his voice as an instrument, I'm wondering, what do you think are like the stakes of approaching the voice as an instrument? Because if it's not an instrument, if it's not something made to make sound, it's another way that we often think about the voice is as something that is just a tool of expression. It's sort of expressing, you know, it's expressing your subjectivity. It's expressing your authentic self. It's expressing your sense of yourself as a person. So what does it mean to then think of it more as an instrument? What do you think is the difference there?
Yeah, well, to me, you know, great question. I think that this whole idea of inspiration, the taking in of breath, and then releasing it is very shamanic. This is quite, you know, we got to a place here this week with a very bardic quality to me, in a magical sense. Like when writing was not available to the masses, it was all oral tradition, and this just goes right back that to me. It's so visceral. I mean, listening to Kerouac just absolutely really blew my mind, and I know that's a horrible cliche, but it's true. I literally was stunned hearing Kerouac recite, and then understanding what he meant about blowing from the bottom of your soul. I mean, so really, I mean, the idea of soul and shamanic, I just felt that it was maybe the most spiritual week that we've had, if I could put it that way.
That's great. And has this experience tempted you to do any of the readings aloud as you're working your way through the syllabus?
That's a great question. I have not been bold enough to do that yet.
Not even in the privacy of your own home?
I know, isn't that horrible? Yeah, that's how repressed we've become as a society, right? So I want to thank the ModPo group. I want to thank Al. I think Al is the most amazing Pied Piper of poetry that I've ever heard. His enthusiasm is so contagious. So,
it actually is quite infectious, yes.
Yeah, so I love that, and I will, as soon as I hang up, I will recite some Ginsberg.
Oh, good! Yay!
I will howl. Yes.
We all applauded you preemptively.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Well,
premature.
Okay. Thanks so much, John. Take care.
Okay. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Wow, so we're inspiring people to read aloud in the privacy of their own homes all over the world. And then maybe you'll make your way to an open mic and don a beret and take a candy cigarette in your hand because that's safe and recite. So we have we can take a few more minutes. Anything happening on Twitter that you think we need to share with our audience, Dave Poplar? I'm looking at Twitter too.
Okay.
Looks like Mark Snyder is with us. Karen Olinaire,
Barbara
Crary, Ray Maxwell. Uh-oh, we're getting sucked into Twitter. We should keep talking.
Well, Mark Snyder did say, forget the forum.
McKenna
all the cool kids
here.
are on Twitter.
Max McKenna just walked into the Arts Cafe. Welcome, Max. You're not wearing your beret. Oh no,
Max,
tragic.
Mike's up here.
Yeah, please come on up.
What's that? Nope.
So, sorry, Dave, I cut you off.
I was just saying, Mark Snyder was observing that all the cool kids are on Twitter anyway. So it's true.
So that's the moment in this week's webcast when we all stopped speaking because we all started staring at Twitter. So it looks like we have one more call coming in. This will probably be our last call of the evening. So Connie, who do we have?
We have D calling from Manila.
T from Manila. Hey, T.
Hi.
How are you?
Just want to say hi to you all, Julia, and Dana, Dave, and to all the rest that are there right now.
It's so nice to hear your voice. How is everything?
I'm good. It's morning here, so everything is all around is quite busy.
So you've got your coffee and you're watching. Is it terribly early there?
No, it's just past 10 a.m. here, so
Oh, okay.
I'm good.
That's reasonable. That's reasonable. And so you've been with us, this is your third ModPo or second ModPo?
Yes, it's my third year.
So is anything striking you this week as new to you in the Beats Week? Something you maybe hadn't noticed before or are maybe noticing a little differently?
Well, just an observation, really. Like I wasn't, when reading the Beat poets before, I wasn't really into Kerouac per se. Like on the scale of Beat poets, I'm more on the Robert Creeley side.
Yeah.
Because for someone, how do I say this? From some perspective from the third world, like there's something about the works of Kerouac and others that comes across sometimes as very self-indulgent for me. Like it's very first world problems. So at times it's hard for me to be able to relate to what they write. For example, for Creeley, I can sense the self-doubt, the existential angst. Those things I can relate to, and I think it's applicable to anyone else who lives all over the world. But for some reason, with some of the Beat poets, it's like it's very I don't really know how else to describe it, but it feels like that sometimes. And I think my quote unquote breakthrough came last year when I looked at it in through the lens of music, I guess, through jazz and the improvisation thing, and the perspective of the artist or the writer letting go and just improvising. I think that's where I start to get them. So just an observation. I don't know if it's like that for anybody else.
No, I think that's beautiful. Yeah, there's something about making the connection to music that just opens up so many different possibilities. Mandana, I feel like you have thoughts about this. We were talking a little bit about this before
actually,
the webcast.
T, you're kind of reading my mind a little. Not just for Creeley, but for a lot of the poets of this week. I can't help but think about what was being done musically with jazz, and we had that wonderful article to read as well. But you think about somebody like a Miles Davis, who effectively deconstructed the song. He just deconstructed phrasing, and you kind of see the same thing with the words. In a way, jazz has no words, and if I'm thinking of like "So What," where you can hear him say "so what" again and again, but with ascending or with descending. So he changes the spelling, he changes the intonation.
I know, you're right, yeah.
And it's wordless, but it's all there. So, and not only is it all there, to your point about different cultures, if you're listening to it as somebody who speaks English versus Urdu versus anything, you're all still hearing Miles Davis. And that, I think, is is a big part of what you see going on now, and certainly with the New York School and what comes. A bit in the Harlem Renaissance, but not quite in this improvisational way. And actually, to your point, this is how I could get into Kerouac a little more, because the improvisation of jazz helps me get into the spontaneity.
Does that help you make sense of something like the babble, the babbling
babble?
prose
Yes.
of Kerouac?
The irony of writing a list of how to be spontaneous is not lost on me.
Max McKenna, do you have enough attention span for us to weigh in on this question?
I hope so.
Did you just walk off a plane? Essentially?
Yeah, it landed right out back, and I walked
Welcome.
off. I don't know if you heard it.
Welcome.
Thank you. We were having this conversation actually in the forums about the relationship to jazz, deep poetry and jazz, and I think that the guidelines on how to improvise are not so much an irony as they are a reality about jazz music. So there's a certain extent to which the jazz performers are not just making things up, right? Like you have to have an incredible familiarity with your instrument, with the rudiments of jazz. It's actually very, very well rehearsed. Like if somebody just picked up a saxophone and blew, as Kerouac asks us to, you wouldn't really get much, or I mean, you get something, and in certain avant-garde circles that would pass as like creative, but not in the bop circles that Kerouac is tapping into. So it kind of makes sense to actually have this sort of plan on how to improvise. Like this is how we're going to do it. Like improvising is not just stream of consciousness or yeah, it's quite mathematical. Yeah. You have to set your parameters. You have to be able to work within that. There's certain codes, rules, things about tonality and rhythm that you really have to go. Yeah, and then you can bend them. Yeah, and that's really where I think that's what Kerouac is trying to get at, even if it's an imperfect analogy or an imperfect connection. I think that's kind of where he's situating himself. Because language is still language, right? Like you have to know it. You have to be able to work within it. And he's still making words, right? And it gets transcribed into legible words. So it's not just sounds. He's not just screaming like Yoko Ono or something. That's what she did.
So T, are you still there? So in a minute, I'm going to ask the TAs to identify one thing they recommend that members of ModPo carry with them forward into the weeks that are coming up, and I want to invite you to do the same. What's one thing that you would recommend everyone take away from this week?
I'm sorry. Outside my house, it's very noisy.
Oh, okay. It sounded like there was a parade or something.
No, it's just somebody selling something.
Okay. So I was just asking, is there one thing that you would recommend that everyone should take away from this week moving forward, past when we start moving on from the Beats week?
Surprisingly, Kerouac's belief and techniques for modern prose really started to mean a lot to me ever since I started to understand it. And I think the first caller, I think earlier, was asking if it was okay if he feels like it, if he feels that way, he likes whatever he feels, if it's dark or whatever. And I think I responded in Twitter. I quoted I think number 24, no fear or shame in the dignity of your experience. So I think that's one of the things that stuck with me, and I will keep with me as I move forward. Whatever it is that you like in ModPo, I echo what Mandana said, that what's important is that it made you feel, and I think that's one of the things that ModPo does very well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. T, I'm really glad you called in, and I want to encourage everyone to follow T on Twitter with one of the best handles ever, which is and how. So follow T at and how. And I hope you'll call in again soon.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a
Okay.
good evening.
Have a really great day. All right. So we're winding down. We're nearing the end of our webcast. Before we go, I want to invite the TAs, including Jason Zezga, to take up this question of what's the one kernel, the one treasure, the one message, the one form, the one approach, the one revelation from this week that you would recommend people carry with them forward in the weeks to come in ModPo.
I would underscore what Mandana said, that the irony of a list of spontaneous, of how to write spontaneously is not lost on her. Don't let it be lost on you, especially in the coming weeks. It's a crucial point for thinking about the New York School and for thinking about the conceptualists will be, especially the last weeks of some of the poets that we'll be reading.
Agreed. Thank you. Allie Castleman, what would you recommend people take away from this week?
I kind of want to get back to where we began actually today, which was, I hope this has been brought up many times. I don't even have to repeat it, but I hope there's nothing wrong with me, that this stuff makes me really happy. But we mentioned like 10 minutes ago or a while ago, I think it was Steve was talking about Al's enthusiasm for poetry being infectious. And I think that his enthusiasm and the kind of feeling of just this week's poetry is pretty similar. I don't know, Al can respond to that by himself, I guess. But it's just poetry that's so excited about itself in this kind of like manic way. But there is, even though, as we said, the content, a lot of it is very dark, and as T, I think, very importantly pointed out, it does leave a lot of people out, and there's a really good, hour-long panel on just the beats from last year that I think is on the ModPo YouTube page that you guys can all check out. That kind of gets more into this, but at the end of the day, there is just this joy radiating from the poetry and from just the exercise of being poems. So I think that's a really good kind of thing to settle onto, and remember getting into the weeks. Although next week is probably my favorite unit, so it's not like we need a reinforcing thing going into next week, but I just think that the enthusiasm of the beats is always, it's kind of why we're here.
Ah, nice. Thank you. Amaris Kuchansky, what do you take away from this week?
What I really like about the beats is the spirit of non-self-censorship. I think that's something that everyone can take away. So exactly like what Allie was just saying, sort of Kerouac's emphasis on spontaneity, Allen Ginsberg's this long breath, sort of unsuppressed, exuberant joy that spills all over the page, is really something that ModPo students can take away, both in terms of responding to the poems and also in appreciation of them.
Nice, thank you. Anna Strong, what are you taking away from this week? Anna Strong, what are you taking away from this week?
I guess keeping with my theme of tonight, hold on to the humor, hold on to the play, and hold on to the fun. There's something about the New York School that is so exuberant and so fun, and all of that is, of course, wrapped up in, kind of, especially with someone like Frank O'Hara, who is someone who is just so full of life and so full of this incredible poetic energy that makes it that much sadder when you know that he died so young. So I think just hold on to that going forward. There is some darkness in the beats, and there is some darkness in the New York School too, but there's so much joy and so much fun and funniness to be found in there too. So hang on.
There's nothing wrong with you if you like it. And I would say, by the way, that that's true for poems that are strange, that seem impenetrable, that seem mysterious, and poems to which you can't seem to attribute any reason for liking them. And Emily Harnett, what are you taking away from this week?
You know, I'm thinking that we should all drive a goddamn big car. But other other than that, there's been a lot of talking about, you know, truth being spoken to power in a pretty unironic way, which is, I think that's a way of sort of working around the things that are problematic about the beats. Is yes, they leave a lot of people out, but you know, this fundamental mission of interrogating power and trying to react in a creative way against power is something that we can celebrate, even while also criticizing the parts of the Beats project which make us uncomfortable.
The parts of the Beats project which make us uncomfortable. We actually haven't gotten to many of those parts tonight, so I hope people will keep talking about those on the discussion forums. Erica Kaufman from the Bard College Institute for Writing and Thinking, genius co-creator of the Teacher Resource Center. You think a lot about the Beats and about teaching the Beats. What's been a highlight for you this week, and what are you taking away?
I guess I just want to leave everyone with a gentle nudge to read a ton of Anne Waldman. What I take away from this week is thinking about Anne Waldman's idea that poetry is news. Poetry can actually accomplish something real right now.
Nice, very nice. And Anne Waldman, of course, is going to be here in this room at the Kelly Writers House in February 2015. So if you're in the area, or if you can get yourself physically to Philadelphia, please come see her. It will be an event not to be missed. If you cannot physically be here, please watch via the webcast. Dave Poplar, Max McKenna, and Mandana Shafa, in no particular order. What are you taking away from this webcast?
This is just
From this week, rather.
my favorite number from Kerouac's Belief and Technique for Modern Prose, and I think it sums up for me everything about this whole era. Submissive to everything, open listening.
Lovely. Max?
I think there's a few different threads that we could take away, but to braid them all together, it would be process, and an attention to process, and an orientation to process. So you have lots of action, I think, in these poems. You have these methods that are being elaborated on how to improvise, as we were just talking about. Things like that we're going to see carried on through into the New York School, with lots of action, of course. And of course to the poets that Jason was just referencing a couple minutes ago. The conceptual poets with their aleatory exercises and stuff like that. So that, I think, we could draw a line between that and what the Beats are doing. And also, I think we're turning out of the Dickinsonian mode and back towards the Whitmanian mode here, and we're going to see that be, I think, the predominant trend in the remaining poets. So that's not entirely true across the board, but I think that's the trend.
Nice, thanks. Mandana?
I'm pretty biased, so yes, the New York School is just going to be fantastic when we get to it. But what I'd really like to think that we should focus on in a way is the silences. I see it a lot in the New York School, that even though the words are there, the silences are the framework for you to hear those words. And it probably reflects also to the art movement, which is a very big part of the New York School, how they fed each other, and the white space informs the painting.
Nice.
I had a guitar teacher who always said that the notes you don't play are just as important.
Yeah, the gaps and the silences, that takes us all the way back to our line breaks and our weird hyphenated, when they don't seem to need to be hyphenated, words. So before we sign off, a few shout outs. Therese Pope, a community TA, posted about a student, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, Varun Arora, who took his peer reviews to heart this week and actually, or last week rather, and actually rewrote his essay on Williams' Young Woman at a Window, and reposted it to the discussion forums. So proof that the essay is a try, it's an attempt, it is something to be revised and rethought and revisited. Anonymous, who posted in the teacher, anonymous of many anonymouses, who posted in the teacher discussion forums to say, I am not an English teacher, but I teach art, going back to what we were just saying about art, at a small community college, and shared that not only does ModPo reach the ends of the earth, but it also reaches teachers of other disciplines. So this is one more plug to teachers of all disciplines, teachers of all levels and in all settings, to share their thoughts about how they are bringing ModPo into their own classrooms. Eric Allen Weinstein, who also is a community TA, held a special office hour on Ginsberg and Howe last Sunday, and will do so again apparently tomorrow morning, even though it's almost 10:30 p.m. But tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. You're up for it. You're gonna have your latte and your donut and.
Tomorrow I will be there from 7 until 9 Eastern Standard Time.
Excellent. So from
Eastern Daylight Time, technically.
Eastern Day. I just say Eastern Time because I can never keep track. So again, Al in Prague, unable to be there for his office hours, so Eric is going to be there talking again about Ginsberg and Howe. Shout outs to Kamara and Connie, who helped us out tonight in Lily's absence with the portable mic and the phones. Zach Cardiner and Chris Martin, wizards of technology and behind the scenes webcasting magic and many intricacies of muting and unmuting and sound levels and camera angles and lighting and making sure my laptop gets connected and all those beautiful things. So thank you again to the TAs, to Erica Kaufman, to Mandana for coming all the way out here on this cold, dark night to sit next to me. This cold, dark night, what shall we do it against it? Thank you all for joining us.
Julia?
And Jason Zuzga. Jason Zuzga.
Julia.
Oh, yeah.
For doing an amazing job.
My pleasure.
Can I make a quick plug?
Yes.
I just finished Claudia Rankin's Citizen, an American Lyric, on the train today, and it was shortlisted today also for the National Book Award.
Yes.
It is excellent, 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 and she is going to be at the University of Chicago, for Chicago people, on the 20th of November. That's a Thursday at 4:30, giving a talk in Rosenwald 405. If you're in Chicago, find me in the Chicago Anyone Forum, and I can give you further details on that. And that is the day after the announcements are made for the winner of the book award. So it's quite possible that she will be joining us as a victor.
Fantastic. Yes, amazing book. Citizen
Excellent, excellent book.
By Claudia Rankin, Rankine. Check it out. See you guys.
Definitely check it out.
Yes.
It's really good.
All right. See everyone next week.